Hey, what's up? I'm Guy.
I'm John.
It's our YouTube channel. Subscribe to this channel. Give this video a like.
We got a podcast below in the description. Need you to subscribe to that right now.
We did a emergency YouTube video on Monday when J.J. Watt signed with the Arizona Cardinals. Today, we're going to talk more about kind of the effect on the NFC West, the Niners, the Rams, the Seahawks, and J.J.'s addition. It's a high-risk, high-reward situation for the Cardinals, as we talked about many times. He's only played 2 full seasons in 5 years. And so I think from that standpoint, Middlecoff, it's a high-risk, high-reward for the other teams in the division. Like, on one hand, you go, man, if J.J. Watt plays 16 games, he's still a good player. But you love seeing an opponent potentially put their eggs in a basket where it might not turn out to be that valuable of an addition. So it's hard to really know exactly what to think about it from the Niners, Seahawks, or Rams standpoint, other than to say if he's healthy, he is a good player that got added to the league division.
I think it's fair to say their roster on paper is really good, right? I mean, it was good last year. They have premium players, right? And I'm not even talking before J.J. Watt. Chandler Jones, Kyler Murray, DeAndre Hopkins. Like, they just have some guys that are just
Budda
pop.
Baker.
Budda Baker.
They add Isaiah Simmons.
Yeah, I mean, Budda Baker really is good. And J.J. Watt, like, to me, this can do twofold. It can either help them become a better team, which is obviously what they're thinking, right? And the reason you pay a guy all this much. Or when you sign a guy of this magnitude, this fame, and you pay him a high-level amount of money, to me, there's like a powder keg in this organization. If the expectations for them are going to go up, right? Because last year they crumbled down the stretch. The Niners kicked their ass with fucking C.J. Beathard. The Rams kicked their ass. They just were losing games that they could have won, and they ended up missing the playoffs, and it was devastating. And the Chicago Bears, with Trubisky and Foles, made the playoffs. We get a little farther away. I think you kind of forget, like, the Bears made the playoffs because the Cardinals fell apart. Like, that's why the Bears were playing the Saints. Now, if the Cardinals had made it, they probably would get their ass kicked too. But the point is, it would have been a big deal for the franchise to make the playoffs and for Cliff. And he couldn't do it. When he was he wasn't like fighting from behind. He was out in front of the race. You know, like Daytona when you're in the lead and like no one's even behind. Like he was in complete control. And now, to me, you add a guy like this, you just wonder. Last year they started hot and then fell apart. What if it's the opposite? Like, what if you're like, yeah, they're not playing that well. They're 2-4 or 3-4, and it's just there gets a tension there in that organization. Because I kind of think if they miss the playoffs, all these guys could get fired. Not the players, but the coach and the GM.
Yeah,
because their expectations, wouldn't you say a non-playoff berth for them, given their roster with the number 1 overall pick, DeAndre Hopkins, now Watt, Chandler Jones.
Adam Shine said today, Tuesday, he thinks they're a Super Bowl contender. And I think part of that is
love Adam. He says that.
I love Adam too. But I do think part of that is like what you just said. Let's take a step back and go. And it's not just Hopkins. It's Christian Kirk. But I think a big part of it is they think their quarterback, and we've talked about this, is an MVP candidate. Are MVP odds on my bookie yet? NFL future MVP odds?
I'll look right now.
I bet he's top. What would you guess whether we got him or not? No, we don't have him yet. What would you guess where will he'll be top 10 in MVP odds? Will he be top 5? Who's going to have better odds?
No, Rodgers,
Josh Allen,
Brady, Josh Allen, Mahomes, Russell Wilson.
Stafford?
Yeah, he'll probably get some buzz for sure.
So Kyler will be top 10?
I could see Wentz getting probably a little inflated now that he moved teams. Derek Carr.
Russ?
Yeah. So, I mean,
I think Kyler would be top 10. That's just my gut immediate reaction. Yeah. So I think part of it is you think he's going to take another big step. He
was a top 3 or 4 guy for what? 75% of the season last year? Like that was tangible. Like he was being talked about.
Well, he started to get talked about once Russell kind of fell back to the pack, right?
But remember, they were winning, and he looked good early on, playing the 9, like week 1. You're like, God, this guy's pretty good.
Right. So somebody on YouTube in the comments on our J.J. Watt video that we did Monday suggested that it was like Richard Sherman signing with the 49ers. And in some ways I see it. But I think the difference is what you've pointed out, is that when Richard Sherman joined the Niners, some of the value is just like you're a rebuilding team. You need a veteran, a guy who's won, a guy who knows what it takes. Remember, you and I went to one of their first OTA practices. Richard was not even on the field yet, but he was high-fiving guys, yelling at guys, coaching guys up, not running around the field, but just he was everywhere. Like, his impact was being felt. But that team was not viewing Richard Sherman like, okay, we got Richard, now it's time to make our run. We're all in on Richard. They didn't overpay, right, for Richard Sherman.
Do you remember when Richard signed his contract? The Florios, I remember Joe Thomas, the former Cleveland left tackle, him and Richard got into it on Twitter like, bro, you fucked up. You didn't take any guaranteed money. And Richard's like, fuck you, I bet on myself. 3 years later, Richard saw like $27 million, right? Because it was like, they can cut him every year. He's got to make Pro Bowls. By the second year, he's all pro. It's like, boom, cha-ching, right? Yep. Remember there was one, they loved him so much by the second year, he didn't even need to hit the requirement. They're like, bonus. They just loved him. Team captain. It was just like, it was worth it. You're right. It to me, it doesn't parallel the situation at all. One, the Niners were just hoping really at the time to be like in the playoff conversation. Like they would just come off Kyle's first year and Jimmy's ending. They were hoping to be good. Richard, but to me, was he was coming off an Achilles tear. When we were at that practice, remember he has the long sleeve on the one leg and they're like, we're going slow. I don't think anyone expected whatever they got out of Richard, and ultimately by the second year, he earned that 3-year contract just in the Super Bowl year alone, being the all-pro guy, right? JJ, they're expecting the way they paid him to be a really good player. So and the expectations are way higher because, like we had talked about, the Kyler, the Hopkins, Buda Bay, just their squad. But the problem is, like, how are they going to get to the playoffs in this division? It's very, very difficult. And they have the worst coach in the division. So this guy chose a team because of money, which, listen, as he got a lot of money, a ton of money. But he did sign up with Cliff Kingsbury. To me, it's one thing with the quarterback. People are like, I want to go where a quarterback is. But I think you also got to factor in the coach, right? The coach and the quarterback, to me, are kind of hand in hand. It's like, who's the coach and the quarterback? It's not like, well, the quarterback. No, it's like the coach and the quarterback. Because they go, you can get by with one's a little bit better than the other. But I actually think they're kind of question marks on both.
Yeah.
Right? Like, can Kyler do it for 16 games, play at a high level? I think there's some weird pressure on him to, like, no one disputes his talent, but, like, can he really be a star?
Right.
Because part of being a star, if you're that good, you make the playoffs.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
with
8-8
with the
last
offensive
year.
weaponry, I forget about Kirk. He's a really good player.
Christian Kirk, yeah.
Yeah.
8-8 last year, the third time Cliff Kingsbury's gone 500 or better in his coaching career, including 6 years at Texas Tech. Right. So the question is, you go 5-10, you go 8-8. Are you going to go 8-8? Are you going to go 9-7? Or are you going to go win 11 games this year? Like, what is? Because to me, obviously going 8-8 again is a failure. But are they just going to go 9-7 and just be a little better? I don't know. I think fully healthy, I do think they could overcome to some degree.
I think we got to change the 17th game so it'd be like 9-8. It's gonna be weird.
Oh yeah, forgot about that.
I saw that 17 games are probably gonna start this year.
I hate
it's gonna be weird. Like, what'd you go? Went 10-7. Like 10 and what? It's gonna throw you off because you're used to numbers. You're just doing your math. Oh, they were shitty. They went 4-12. No, they went 4-13. It's gonna be weird for people. Get ready.
God, going 3-14. That's gonna feel worse.
The
than
extra
3-13.
game could really be like, God, you're throwing a little more kerosene on the fire here.
It's got. Yeah, we're gonna have to keep
8-8
remembering.
8 sounds a lot better than 8-9.
Totally.
7-10. 7-9 is like, oh, we're making strides. 7-10, you're like, God, you kind of suck. That extra game is gonna put some people on the unemployment line and get some contract extensions, right? God, you went
You won 13 games again.
I guess 11 games isn't quite the same, huh? Like 11-6. That actually sounds pretty good. Is 11-6 the new 10-6?
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see where like the cut line is for the playoffs, right? But there'll be an extra team, probably.
I wonder what 8-9 feels like. Because 8-8 always feels like you're not a joke by any means, but you're not that good. Like, does 8-9 feel like the 7-9 used to feel, or does 8-9 feel like, oh, they're right in the mix?
I'll be honest, it doesn't make sense. 8-9 feels a little worse than 7-9.
I
it doesn't make sense. It feels heavier. Like, it's just a lot. Like, oh my God, that was a long year to lose 9 games and be under 500.
Well, especially if at one point in time you're like 5-9 and you rattle off like 3 straight victories to get to 8. Now, I guess it's going to depend on how you finish, but
It's a lot of damn games. But
you go
that's
like
another
16
part of
and
this,
1,
John. You're talking about playing full seasons now, and the seasons are longer, right? Chandler Jones only played 5 games last year. Now, that was a bicep surgery.
Yeah. But he was out for the season. I mean, it was a season ender.
Yeah. So we're talking about, I love the stat, like on the bottom line, like, oh, the most sacks since whatever year.
The one thing, and I think we
two
use
of them,
this
they
too
lead,
much, if you're fully healthy, like every team has injuries, but like if the main players on the card stay healthy, they do have a lot of impact ballers, right?
Yeah.
Like J.J. Watt like led the league in pressures. Like J.J. Watt's still a really good player, and he's not even the best pass rusher on his own team. Now, I heard someone say I think the Cardinals were 4th in sacks last year. So, like, a huge part of going to the Bills or the Packers, like, he was going to add something. I just wonder, like, will you even feel his presence that much? In the division, it's going to be tough. I mean, the division is way better than what he's used to.
Yeah.
Right? That division.
Yeah, that's true. I do think this, though, as it relates to the Niners and the other 2 teams in the division. Because of Cliff, you might say they're just limited. Their ceiling is capped. But you can't deny the Jimmys and the Joes, the more talented you get, just the harder you are. Even if your coach is, ultimately, you just got guys on the field running around making plays. Like, this does make them harder to beat if he's healthy.
Like, they probably don't have a 14-3 season in the bag, but do they have a 10-7?
But if they have a 10-7, it feels like Cliff's doing good things, right?
Hell yeah! I mean, if they go 10-7, it would be. That's what I'm saying.
But I'm saying
if I told you McVay or Kyle was the coach of this team, you'd be like, God, they could win 12, 13 games. With this team, I think if they went to 10, it'd be a huge win. They'd probably get contract extensions. My whole point on them, they have, because of the coach, a 6-7 win team in the bag.
Yeah,
right? Because they kind of overachieved early, it turned out.
But what I'm saying is, and they beat the Niners and the Seahawks last year.
But they have historically, I'd say over this decade, played those teams really well. Like they are, and it's part of being in the division. They never feel like when I watch them against their divisional opponents, they always like their players believe. And I think it helps once you've been like DeAndre, or he's a bad example. He just showed up. Chandler Jones now has been in the division for a while. I don't think he looks like, oh, Seattle, right? You just get kind of used to it. Because remember, Bruce Arians, when Seattle was even better, I felt like they used to kind of go toe-to-toe with him with Carson Palmer and some of those night games. I do think that for whatever reason, they just play their division well. To me, it's more like I turn on like, guy, you seeing this? They're losing to the Jets. Or guy, you seeing this? They're losing. They're down 10 to the fucking Giants on the road, 10 a.m. I thought last year, I actually had more faith. Like, yeah, I mean, the Niners could easily lose to them. I was more like, they're playing the 2-win Eagles. Like, that's a loss. It was things like that I don't trust Cliff. And that, to me, is where good teams. I know, but my point is, like, that is where I lost trust in them last year. Yeah, they can lose to, especially when they go east. I just feel, they're playing the Bengals, it's a tie game in the third quarter. That's where, to me, I kind of red flag them.
In their defense, that Week 16 loss to the Niners was kind of a home game for the Niners, too.
Yeah, it's one way to put it. You lose.